Hey there, how are you today? I'm Connie Foote with Foote Title Group, where we protect your home ownership. And this is Coffee with Connie. Thanks so much for taking your few minutes this morning and tuning in. So today I wanted to, as I try to do a lot when we get together, is talk about things that people have asked me questions about. And, there's a lot of different topics we could talk about and information that I like to share that maybe are things you don't know. But when someone asks a question, I like to try to talk about that topic so that we can cover that information, because more than likely, if someone has that question, someone else is going to have a similar question. So, hey there, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Good morning, Bob. Good morning, Phil. Hey, sweetie. How are you? So I wanted to talk this morning about private personal information, because I had this question come up the other day. Somebody wanted me to provide some information out of a closing that we just can't do. And, when the real estate market had its big crash several years ago, one of the big things that the federal government focused on and really pushed us as title agencies, but particularly the mortgage companies, was to protect your personal and private information. And when you buy a house, it's probably one of the main times that everything that is your personal and private information is out there for everybody involved in this particular project, this transaction. So most importantly, I talk about all the time, when you're going to be buying a house, the first thing you think about is finding a realtor that can help you navigate through the real estate contract. And hey there, Beth, how are you this morning? So finding a good realtor is very important, because they're going to help you navigate through the process. But finding your mortgage lender is just as important, because that's the person you're going to have to give all that personal and private information to, so they can get the loan approved that you need to buy that dream home that you've found. And then, of course, we talk about who's going to do your closing and make sure your home is protected. But when we're talking about that mortgage, let's talk about that for a minute, because as I said, when the home crisis happened, or the real estate crisis, mortgage crisis, economy crash, all of whatever you want to call it, happened about 8 years ago, one of the biggest things that everyone focused on was the mortgage part of the economy, because the mortgage lenders had a lot of information and were able to do certain things with that information. And the federal government looked at all of these pieces, and one of the things they said was, we really want to make sure that people's private information is protected, and we feel like maybe it doesn't have the protection that it should through this particular process. So what they did is really started holding mortgage lenders' feet to the fire and saying, you get all of this personal information about people, and we want to know how you protect that information. And then anyone else that's involved in the process has access to some of that information, and we also want to know how you're going to protect that information. And basically, they make the mortgage lender the one that's driving the train, and if anyone else in the process screws up and releases or accidentally has a leak in private information in several different ways, then the mortgage lender's the one that's held to the accountability to the federal government. And so then the mortgage lender decides who that they want to deal with and who they don't. So even though you as the consumer have the ability to say, this is where I want to close, this is who I want to deal with for my real estate contract, the mortgage lender is going to say, yeah, well, they don't protect private information in a way that we expect that to happen. And because we are the ones that are held accountable, we have a little bit of say in that. So the mortgage lender is the one ultimately, because they're the ones who get most of that private information, who can determine what information is released and also who it's released to. So let's talk about that for a few minutes, because there's a lot of pieces that go into play here. Hey there, Lisa. Hey there, Mr. Greshus. How are you today? Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. I appreciate you guys checking in and tuning in. So let's think about this, and let's talk about the process and think about how it all works. So you find the realtor that you want to work with, and you give them the information that they need to be able to do the process. But technically, they don't have a lot of your personal information. But when you find your mortgage lender, they're going to have your social security numbers, your bank account information, who you pay rent to, who you may pay mortgage to now, what all of your bills are, maybe even some of your bank account information, because you have to give them that, credit card information, all of that private information, all of that financial, personal information. They have all that because they have to check it and make sure that you are a viable candidate for them to loan money to. So they have to have some security in place, and they're going to give you some information that will explain to you how they protect that information of yours. But then they actually have the requirement to provide a little bit of that information to some other parties involved. So maybe the credit reporting agency, they're going to be looking that up. The title company they work with, they don't necessarily provide all of your personal information, but your title company may have a copy of your loan application, which has some of that information. And how do they protect that private information? And they should have some procedures and policies in place to be able to do that. And then there is also a document that you're going to sign at closing. Well, there's going to be several that are going to have your social security number on that, and the title company needs to make sure that you need to make sure that that title company has good procedures in place to make sure that's protected. But the lender in advance is going to make sure that that title company that's doing that closing has those procedures in place. They ask us for that information all the time. What are our procedures and what happens and how do we protect that private information of that borrower to make sure that that loan company doesn't have a problem and doesn't have a violation, and also to make sure that that borrower is protected. So your title company should have procedures in place to protect that information, and also processes to make sure that information doesn't get out. But with that also comes the requirement on that title company not to be able to release any information to anyone else out of that closing without the lender approving it. And I know as a consumer, the consumer has the right to say, hey, I want to release that, but the consumer, unfortunately, we're regulated by the lender and the rules that they have, and we actually provide them with a certification saying we will follow exactly your rules, and if we don't, we won't be able to do that closing. So even though the consumer says to us, hey, you can go ahead and release that information to someone, we can't do that because the lender drives that those requirements to the title company about what can and can't be done. Now, the consumer can release whatever they want to their realtor, to anyone else involved in the process, but the title company themselves cannot release any of that paperwork to anyone but the consumer in that particular transaction. So the reason that I talk about this is because we run into this all the time. Good morning, Miss Kathy. How are you today? Where your real estate agent, if you're the buyer or you're the seller and your real estate agent wants a copy of the document that has all the figures on it, and in the buyer side of the process, it's called the CD or the closing disclosure, and the realtor may ask us to release the closing disclosure before closing because they want to review your closing disclosure to make sure that all the pieces are in the right place, all the numbers are on there, that there's no confusion at closing. And we totally understand that they want to review that in advance to make sure that all of your pieces are right. But the problem is the closing disclosure has a lot of private information on it, particularly details about your loan. And the lender says to us, we cannot release that closing disclosure to anyone except for that borrower. So because of that, I don't care if in the real estate contract it says that we can release the closing disclosure and the buyer signed that, we absolutely can. We can give it to the buyer, and the buyer can give it to their realtor, or the lender can give it to the realtor, but the lender's the one that makes the rules and tells us what we can and can't release, because ultimately the lender is held responsible, and so the lender has to be in control of who can see that information. And so they are the ones who have all that private information, and they're the ones who tell us who can get it and who can't. So if you, in your real estate contract, you have signed something that says, hey, my realtor can get a copy of that closing disclosure, we still cannot release that closing disclosure. Now, we can release a different document. It's called an ALTA statement, and it has a breakdown of a lot of the numbers, but it doesn't have any of your private information on it. And we're happy to release that, and the lenders are fine with us releasing that because it doesn't have your private information on it. But the CD, or the closing disclosure, which is the new form that we have that replaced the HUD-1 settlement statement that has all the numbers on it, actually has loan information on it. So the lenders don't allow us to release that information. So if your realtor says, hey, you know, you signed this in the contract and they won't give it to me, this is why. It's not like we're trying to be difficult, but unfortunately at the end of the day, the lender is the one who drives that personal information because it's your private information that they have. And they want to make sure that everyone involved in the the process, understands the gravity of that, and they make the rules and determine who can have what documents because of that information. Hey there, Laura. How are you today? Hey, Miss Pam. Hi, Miss Donna. How are you today? Thank you guys so much for tuning in. So because the lender is the one you're giving all this private information to, they're the ones who determine who can see that information, and they are really held to a higher standard by the federal regulations. So if you've signed something in your contract that says your realtor can see a copy of that, we can give it to you as the borrower, but we cannot give it to your realtor even though it says that in your real estate contract, because the lenders told us we can't do that. So talk to your realtors, make sure they understand. Realtors, if you are listening to me, please share this information. We're not trying to be difficult, but unfortunately we're held to these standards too because of all of that private information that's out there. So we're trying to make sure that we all follow the right rules. We all protect everybody's private information, because we've all heard these horror stories about all of that getting out, and we've all seen people, or maybe experienced it ourselves, with our personal information getting out there, and someone being able to get into our bank account, our credit card, or whatever. And so this is one of those areas that there's a lot of private information out there. And so because of the ways that we are tasked with making sure that's protected, there's some rules in place that don't allow us to maybe do some things that maybe otherwise, we used to be able to do a little bit differently. So we have some pretty strict rules in our office about who can see what, who touches what documents are sitting out, and how things are regulated. And so because of that, we are ultimately really want to make sure that all of that private information is wrapped up in a tight spot so no one can get to it. And we're very serious about making sure your information is protected. So hopefully maybe that gave you some information, some thoughts. Maybe if somebody has had this conversation with you, maybe if you're buying a house and the realtor explained to you that this was in the contract and now the title company's not doing it, maybe that explains to you why. Maybe the lender's not giving your realtor some information that they need, and maybe that explains to you why. Ultimately, you and the lender are the ones who drive that information, and so the lender is going to be very protective of that and who they let give that information out. So hopefully I helped you think about something a little differently today, spurred a question maybe that you had. If you found what we're talking about interesting, valuable, please share. I can only get to other people and hopefully help them out if you guys share with people that you know. One other thing I wanted to point out, we have lots and lots of resources on our website. We just launched our most recent piece at the beginning of May, earlier this week. That actually, I think at the beginning of last week, sorry about that, 10 most common questions or things you need to know as a first-time home buyer. You can go on our website and download it. There's a circle that says what's new. You can click on there and download it there. It's on our social media. Emails have been going out. So go on there and download that, get that information. There's also all other kinds of resources on our buyer side page, on our sellers page, also on the realtors and lenders page, with all kinds of content there. If there's something that's not there that maybe you would find helpful, let me know, and it would be great to be able to help you with that additional content later. So hopefully I helped you guys a little bit today. Charles, good morning. Hope you're enjoying Puerto Rico, tuning in all the way from there. Hopefully you guys are having a great day, and I look forward to talking to you all the time. If you have other questions, reach out and let me know what those are. Message me, text me, whatever. I'm always here to help out, and I want to provide you with information that actually helps you with some questions that you have. So hope you guys are having an awesome day. This real estate market is super hot, so if you're looking to buy something, now is the time. There's lots of stuff out there. If you're looking to sell, now is definitely the time. So talk to those realtors or reach out to us. We have a lot of good professionals we like to work with, and make sure you choose your title company. If you're buying a home, you have the right to choose where you do your closing, and it really matters because they protect your home ownership. I'm Connie Foote with Foote Title Group. Thank you for tuning in with Coffee with Connie. Foote Title Group, where we protect your home ownership. Have a great day, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.